So well, I'm very pleased to welcome Silke as one of our speakers. She is Senior Language Teaching Officer in the faculty. Of course, she has a very long career in terms of experience with language teaching. So that's, of course, one main starting point for her for being engaged in this discussion. She is also a Fellow and Director of Studies at Magdalen College in German. And she's published extensively both the textbooks materials for teaching, but also about pedagogy and teaching methodologies, both on paper and online. So that's one important aspect of why she is deeply engaged in this discussion. But she's also the faculty's Directorate of School Liaison and Outreach, which places her in a very important role in terms of talking towards the outside community, but also talking to us about what we can do in this context. And then she is involved in a number of other initiatives that are all linked to her role in one way or another. So please.
The other time I talked about this issue, I felt I had to introduce myself as a bargaining chip. Because I think that's the current debate or the way it's going. However, that doesn't make me feel chipper. I think it's the times are not right for this. So thanks very much for inviting me to talk about this. And as Wasim said, I'll focus on the points recruitment and outreach. And then I think Sally will talk a little bit more on the broader context to do with research in particular in modern languages. And maybe I should explain that I base quite a lot of what I'm going to say today on a survey I conducted with a colleague of mine, Andrea Klaus from Warwick University. So I wanted to at least mention her as well because she co-authored the report we wrote based on a survey we did with our returning students from the year abroad. So these are all students of German. And we had about 50 replies. Obviously, this is not statistically relevant, we're aware of this, but we wanted to document what we thought and have been thinking for a long time, and namely that going on a year abroad is good for everybody, but is specifically good for our kinds of students, students studying a degree in modern languages. And we felt rather than us going on about the benefits, it would be better to have quotes from students, so that's why we did this questionnaire with our students. And I'd also like to thank our students for engaging with this so willingly. The report has been published on this university's website, and it's also since been published on other websites. I think I'll say this later. And because I'm not quite sure I wasn't sure who would turn up today, I wondered how much information I needed to supply to do with Erasmus. I'm sure you've all heard of this. But here are just a few figures to do with the kind of current trends that we've been observing. So yes, it's true that usually we usually receive more students from the European Union coming to study here, but the trend seems to be changing, and more students from Britain seem to be choosing to go abroad and spend a year in a country in the European Union or elsewhere, making use of the Erasmus finances. And this is some more information which comes from Universities UK, just to give you the kind of maybe political background where we are at the moment to do with Erasmus. The first slide here really is about how Universities UK are still searching assurance from the government to do with all sorts of things surrounding Brexit and the EU citizens in this country, British citizens in the EU. So I've just highlighted a few things to give you this sort of information. And if I jump ahead and mention the terms outreach and recruitment, insecurity about these sorts of questions. Insecurity, I think we've heard this over and over in the news, is bad for business, but it's also bad for potential students making decisions about what sort of degree to invest in, because it is an investment if you think about it. This is from Universities UK website. They have frequently asked questions, particularly concentrating on Erasmus+. And again, you see the last bullet point here, they're urging the government to seek assurances to kind of keep the Erasmus deal for our students, for both directions, safe, and to guarantee this. But I don't know whether everybody here listened to Theresa May's speech. There was nothing about this in there. I'm aware, of course, that we're kind of a tiny bit of the whole debate, but that's our bit, and that's what we're looking for, that's what I'm looking for. And this is, in way of background, just in case you need reminding, or any of us need reminding, we're already operating as a faculty in a fairly difficult climate. So these are GCSE language entries. You can see, the decline is continuing. So we have a problem here. Fewer GCSE entries lead to fewer A-level entries. You have the figures here. Is this? I'm not using the microphone, and I'm aware that there's a kind of tunnel vision going on. Is this still okay? Yeah. Okay. So numbers are falling. You can envisage maybe the cycle here: fewer students at school, fewer university students, fewer teachers to go back. If the government wants to hang on to the EBAC, I'll not go into the detail here, but this is one way of ensuring that languages count towards league table counting at schools. If they haven't, there's a consultation going on, but the government hasn't said anything about whether they want to continue with the EBAC. But if they do, then we have a shortfall of teachers for languages. So the figures vary. Is apparently between 2,000 and 3,000. So where they're going to come from. So it's already, even without Brexit, it's already quite a difficult climate. Which is why we have quite a lot of, an apparatus, I suppose, in place to work towards recruitment and outreach and to support the teaching of languages at school. As a university, we feel we need to work with schools to support languages. So that's the background. And then maybe I can tell you just a few things from the survey we did with our students. And here are a few quotes. So we asked the students we had several questions, obviously, but there were also lots of opportunities for just any kind of things that they wanted to tell us beyond just ticking boxes. The students clearly stated that subtleties and colloquial use of a language linked with cultural awareness can best be learned in the host country. I think we all know this. Furthermore, through their overall experience and opportunity to acquire skills, they gained confidence and self-awareness. It's something that is more difficult to measure, I suppose, and developed as a person, which makes them more employable both in the UK and abroad. When it came to the matter of Erasmus funding, many students stated that they could not have afforded going abroad without financial support through Erasmus. And a lot of students came to the conclusion that they would not have opted to study a foreign language without a compulsory year abroad. So we have these sets of circumstances here. Do you want to study a degree? Because there are some people discussing maybe we should make the year abroad not compulsory, to make it possible for students who are maybe not financially able to afford this. But then we might lose some students who would not opt to do this degree if it wasn't compulsory and an integral part of the degree. But then you have the students who might not opt to do the degree in the first place because of these financial worries. So it's a fairly difficult or complex mixture of hurdles, I'd say. One student, so we asked them about about these things. So here we have somebody saying without the opportunity to have a year abroad in the target country, that can make studying a language an almost redundant activity. Or we have, it was a life, so this is about what they felt about their year abroad, life-changing experience, which I want as many people as possible to be able to have. Remember, these are people who've had the year abroad, so they're thinking about their future colleagues. They said it was the highlight of their time at university. We hear this quite often. And I like this one. It is one of the most defining features of my life to date and has utterly changed me as a person. I like the qualifier, just in case it was better. Students would lose one of the best years of their lives. So we kind of assumed all this, but it was nice to have this in writing from the students. One of the open questions asked the respondents was, what would future students lose should the Erasmus Plus program be abolished? And the responses we received were very telling. To summarize, most students mentioned that it was an amazing opportunity whilst not having to worry about finances. They mentioned it was an opportunity to experience and immerse themselves in another country and another culture, to develop a high sense of self-confidence, become open-minded. They mentioned the whole ethos around Erasmus as togetherness and collaboration. Other students raised concerns about the value of learning a foreign language without being able to visit the country where the language is spoken, stressing that the language would never become innate to a student without the experience of the year abroad. I think as language teachers, we're all aware of the benefits. The students, not just do they look different when they come back, their spoken language is just completely changed, for the better. I should qualify that too. They also pointed to the dangers of relying on stereotypes of other countries rather than having the opportunity to bring societies closer together. One short and poignant statement read, students, I think that's the students would lose one of the best years of their lives, and one person just put they would lose everything. Drawing from the survey, it can clearly be seen how much students of modern foreign languages value the year abroad in the context of Erasmus+. It is clear that the year abroad is a vital part of the degree course, one which shapes and develops the student in a way which should not be underestimated and which cannot be replaced by anything the home university can offer. Its loss would be of immense detriment, I think, to modern foreign languages and to our future students in general. We realized, of course, that we needed to send our report also to those who needed convincing. So we all knew this, we felt our own views were confirmed, and that we needed to publicize this more broadly. So I think, so these are the reactions we've had so far. So this is where we've been publicizing our report. We had an article in the New European based on the report, and yesterday there's an article in the Times Higher based in parts on this report. The MP for Coventry South tabled questions. Open Britain have confirmed that they will be campaigning for the UK to stay a full member of the programme. We have sent it to the all-party parliamentary group for modern languages, and we've sent it. I'll not list everybody, but I just thought I'd tell you. So it's not just because I'm assuming I'm kind of talking to the converters already, but we realised that we needed to send this to others. We also sent it to local MPs, and we asked our students to contact their local MPs. So hopefully they can make a bit of an impact. Well, I think you have to stay optimistic, so I think that's why we did this. Particularly, and this is just to finish my presentation on outreach and impacts on outreach and widening participation and recruitment. Here's one reaction. I'll just read this out. I believe that a large number of students will be put off during a year abroad should this funding no longer be available, leading to fewer students choosing to study languages at university, and in the long term a major lack of skilled linguists. So it's a kind of obvious cause and effect, I think. We have some more here, so you can see mention of lack of financial support would have put them off. would discourage the global attitude, negative social and political ramifications. They feel they would lose more by leaving the EU than the UK could gain. They feel that these opportunities would be taken away from future students. I think these are comments from angry young students. I think they're quite passionate about this, and in discussions I've had with students, this is reflected. Just some further quotes, and because I can't say things like this, but I kind of felt the last one was quite funny. Perhaps one day whispered rumors of the Erasmus program will echo down the corridors of grammar schools, and students will wonder with hopeless longing what it might be like if only their grandparents had not voted to leave the European Union in this silly moment of nationalist madness. So that's a quote. It's worth putting up here and reminding us. Strategies, because I think we can't really, or I don't want to stop on a kind of negative note. We need to do things. We can offer our questionnaire to other people in other departments and other universities if they wanted to do the same survey. Obviously also to other faculties. This university hasn't just modern language students going abroad. There are other faculties who also send students abroad. And in all this we should remember it's not just for students. Erasmus Plus is also for work placements. It's staff mobility, it sponsors and finances and supports schools. So it's a kind of bigger group. I mentioned we can petition local MPs and ministers. We can get our students involved. So these are some of the more immediate strategies, I suppose. And maybe just to remind us of the arguments. So when asked, well, why should any government support this elitist club of Cambridge students who are doing a degree that is a bit kind of pointless anyway? Why should they kind of be helped financially to have a good time, I don't know, on some beach in Spain? Because these are some of the arguments that we come across. So in the past, I think we've used the kind of economic argument why it makes sense to study modern languages, and I've just listed a few things where one can find arguments. Born Global is a British Academy funded project. You can find on their website lots and lots of arguments, lots of studies. The CBI has just published their 9th survey on education and skills. I think I took a note somewhere. Yes, here. So they quote the demand among businesses is still the major EU languages. So this is what business leaders have replied to questions. French, 50% of them said yes, that's the language we need most. German, 47%. Spanish, 30%. So that's still quite high up there. ACTFL is the American Council on the Teaching of Foreign Languages, and they have a very good compilation on research on the benefits of language learning. So that comes from a completely different geography, but still there are some very good points there. And Insider Business UK, they've just published a study where they counted job offers and then counted the kind of prerequisites and the salaries. And there they have a top 9. I don't know why they have a top 9. German comes out top, so that's the highest salaries for UK applicants to jobs in the job market currently, followed by Arabic, then French, Dutch, Spanish, Japanese, Russian, Italian, and Mandarin. So out of those 9 languages, there's still 5 that are European-based languages. So these are the kind of economic arguments we are used to putting forward. Adrian Armstrong from Queen Mary quoted this at a recent meeting. He says that given the trade between the UK and the EU is as buoyant as it is, and if Brexit happens, and if it happens in this hard fashion, then linguists will be in demand. So that's kind of turning a bad situation into a good situation. And that's why I've called this the now more than ever argument. And then we have non-instrumentalist arguments. At this university, there's a big research project called MITES, Multilingualism, Empowering Individuals, Transforming Societies. They're looking into all sorts of benefits to do with language teaching and learning, and not just the kind of financial benefits. Oxford has a creative multilingualism project. So there are lots of things emerging where we can find arguments. That's just my bibliography. So I think I'll finish by saying that so that's my co-author, Andrea Claus and I, we firmly believe it is absolutely vital for Erasmus Plus to survive in order to safeguard competitiveness and to ensure the best opportunities for young educated people. We need to guarantee Erasmus Plus for future generations. The UK's exclusion from Erasmus Plus would be a calamity for the academic exchange between Britain and the rest of the EU, as well as for future cultural bonds. Thank you very much.
In this, in that my daughter is just about to start applying to do a language degree, and is just about to start the process of choosing where she wants to go. And the reason that she wants to do a language degree is because she says that it will open up the world to her, it will enable her to travel, it will enable her to meet people, and it will give her lots of choices, and because she actually has a joy in another language. And I think that that's the point that we have to start from, that what you do here is something that is not just an economic good, but it is a personally enriching and transforming thing. To allow someone access to another culture, to another country, is something that they will gain and benefit from all their lives, and those around them will do so as well. So I am absolutely in your corner on this, because I absolutely want to know that she will have as many options as she can and will have the ability to travel and to learn what's going on in the world. I was asked to talk on a broader level. Because I was looking at what was happening here in the department, I did a little bit of background just to get a sense again of what's been happening to language teaching within our country over the last few years. And you don't need me to explain to you that this has been a declining area in terms of the way that universities are investing in the subjects and the way that they are supporting. We know that it has become very much now a degree type that is seen in the Russell Group universities as opposed to the newer universities, and that in many ways is because it's feeding through from the decisions that I have to say were taken by a Labour government when they removed the mandatory need for a student to have to study a language up to GCSE, and that of itself I think has had an incredibly negative and damaging effect on the numbers of students who are even at the point where they had the choice to be someone who wanted to think about doing a language degree or not. The knock-on effect then goes through to those who then decide that they're going to stay on to do postgraduate study. The knock-on effect goes on to those who then carry on to be teachers within the university system. And that of itself becomes a circular problem, because you're then not having the generation of interest and ideas going back into schools. So I think that decision was one that we really have to look at and say that that has done terrible damage long-term to what we have in the university sector in terms of language. And it pains me to say this, but I have to say that Michael Gove did do something right. When this is not good on camera, I have to say. It's the only time you'll hear me say this. But when he said that we actually had to go back to having at least a language up to GCSE level, was the start of a recovery from what had been done. Nicky Morgan carried on with that, and if you just looked at that particular part of their policy, it should have been a point where we're starting to say, well, we're starting to recognise that this is an outward-looking country, this is a country that actually needs languages as part of what it's doing, this is a country that recognises the centrality of being able to speak outward and not look inward. But then Brexit. And I don't know about you, but I did speak to people for quite a number of days after that happened, because I was in shock. I was in absolute shock. And I think that the point that I want to start with here is that, as you said, we have to recognise that starting from a position where you're seen as privileged, where you're seen as educated, where you're seen as being part of a liberal elite, is what is actually driving a lot of the willingness to not hear the arguments about the benefits of what you do, because that is what happened in that whole campaign. There was a deliberate dumbing down, there was a deliberate introduction of fear of that which is different, there was a deliberate attempt to turn people away from being part of a culture, part of a country, part of an economy that welcomed and supported that kind of attitude, that turned us into one that said that that is actually doing us damage. And we have to recognise that that argument won. That argument got traction. And we can't pretend it didn't happen, and we can't pretend that those aren't attitudes that are there and are ones that actually are strongly felt. And that is where, when you sat and watched Theresa May this week, you see where she's getting her energy from. Because she is looking at 2020, she's looking at the next election, and she's positioning herself within the Tory party and within the country to win on the basis that we are going to continue down this path of narrowing down our opportunities, narrowing down our choices, and turning us into a country that is very limited in the way that it actually interacts with the rest of the world, particularly with Europe. And I'm spelling it out because that's what I'm getting right across the Tory government, whether I'm in the Ministry of Justice, where I'm spending time along with the POA, meeting them about what's happening in prisons and our educators there, or whether I'm in Bays, talking to them about what's happening in science and technology, or whether I'm in the Department of Education, talking to them about what's happening about funding both in HE and FE. In any of those departments, the same message is coming across. And it's one that I think we have to recognise as a challenge to us, and one that we have to really stand up to, and we have to really deal with, not just short term, but long term, to turn this argument around, because otherwise we are not going to have an education system that's going to be worth diddly squat, particularly in terms of languages. So I'm going to tell you the bad stuff first, and then I'm going to start talking to you about what we as a union are doing, and hopefully get some feedback from you as to whether you think I've got it right, or whether you want to make sure that I'm going away with other information to add to what I'm doing. When I have the first meeting with what is now Bays, it used to be BIS, which sounds very like beige, doesn't it? It's quite disturbing every time I meet them. They said to me that there were 40 areas across government that had been identified as ones that had to be looked at for the negotiating strategy. That then had got knocked down to 20 by the Brexit department, of which higher education was one. They then took me into a football analogy and said, if you want to look at where HE sits in terms of the Premier League, you are Southampton. Which, I don't know what you think about that, but what they then said to me is, understand that Chelsea is immigration, Manchester is the NHS, etc., etc., etc. And I tell you that story because I literally had to sit there and hear the whole of the higher education system sort of like crunch down into that. But that does tell you about the level of panic and the level of speed with which all of this was happening, because they didn't really have an awful lot of detail to say why certain things have been thrown out, other things have been kept in. But first base was that HE had been kept in. We then get into the discussion about what is happening about research funding and about teaching, and at that point they absolutely had no idea whether we were even going to get an announcement about any guarantees on research funding up and including the deadline for the actual vote itself. And only after a lot of pressure was brought to bear did we get the speech that came out that said that research funds that had been agreed up and until the actual vote would be ones that the government would commit to making sure they were supporting. You note that there has been no guarantee about them supporting any funding applications that are actually in play post that vote. And we know that that is a constant in academic life, that actually having that deadline means that we're already draining away in terms of the support that we need to have to make sure that we remain competitive and we remain in the game. We have also had lots of conversations with them about what is going to be done about our EU nationals who are working within higher education and our students who are in HE here in this country, and also our students, as you're talking about through Erasmus, who are going to the rest of Europe. To date, there is absolutely no certainty, and I have to be clear with you about that. There is no certainty at all about how higher education is going to be dealt with. We know from the speech this week that it is going to be part of the negotiation. We also know that the Prime Minister herself still has no idea about how she's going to undertake this, other than that she wants to have an agreement with Europe about how we can actually keep the funding streams, how we can actually keep the research streams, how we can actually keep the interaction over the whole of the continent. Well, that's not a surprise, but the rest of Europe, I have to say, isn't necessarily in the same place as the Prime Minister. So hearing her say that is not taking us a great deal of the way forward. On top of that, this week, I have been asked by the department to start thinking about how we would define an academic. Now, welcome to my life. I have these very strange conversations. What do you mean? I said. Well, they said to me, we have to have discussions with the Home Office and with the Brexit Department and with the Cabinet about immigration. We have to find ways of explaining what an academic is in such a way that it's not so broad that they say that that means nothing, therefore you're going to let everyone in, those nasty, nasty foreigners, but it's loose enough that it keeps your postgraduates, it keeps your full-time employed academics, it keeps your students who are doing a small amount of teaching, it keeps your researchers, it keeps everyone that we actually need within the system. Now, what I have said to them is that that is an impossible task, other than if you go back to what a statute says, where it defines what an academic does, which is research, teaching, some administration, governed by statutes to protect academic freedom. But the problem that we have with that is that the university sector itself has been destroying that very definition by putting people on casualised contracts, putting them on teaching-only contracts, utilising postgraduate students in a way that I consider quite abusive to do most of the teaching in order that they can actually get through their postgraduate studies. So of itself, the sector has got a problem. But that is what they are grappling with in government. They are trying to find a way from one department to protect against another department that has the priority, the Chelsea, in this discussion, which is that immigration has to be closed down. So we are then also getting into the game of whether it's taking the business critical argument forward, and it is an argument that then goes into individual jobs. Is it a person who is needed in that role? Is it something that's going to be of benefit to the country? Is it something that's going to have a high wage attached to it? Well, I have to say to them as well, I'm terribly sorry, but because the sector has been paying its staff so badly, you're going to have to think very carefully about whether you put an actual price tag against a university job, because it doesn't work like that. So all of this conversation is taking place week by week by week. And I feel very strongly that what I'm hearing is running desperately to catch up with an agenda that hasn't yet been fully defined, set against a negotiation with the rest of Europe where we are being sold a pup. That's what I think. Because it is absolutely lacking in any intelligence to not understand that if you have the rest of Europe agreeing to free movement, recognising that that is an economic benefit, and working together in terms of trading agreements, we are not in the strongest position, and that is something that we have to recognise, and having come out, there will be a price to pay. Then you get on to the politics of it, and I again want to be very honest with you. I voted to stay in Europe. I personally do not have a democratic problem with us having another referendum at the point where they get whatever ridiculous deal they're going to come up with. I don't see that as an issue. But I know that's not an argument that's getting much traction, but that is something that I think it's worth you being aware that that's where I'm coming from, because I think that we have to work very hard to try and actually keep these doors open, and that includes actually taking on this argument that you have one decision taken once and you never revisit it, because I think we have to. That includes talking to the Labour Party, that includes talking to the Libs, that includes talking to the Greens, it includes talking to the Tories, and we're going to have to keep on doing that right the way along the line. So what we have done within the Union is start putting some meat on the bones on this. We have started getting very clear evidence that we are putting in front of MPs, that we are putting in the press to show that we have academics who are telling us very clearly now already that they have colleagues who are considering moving from working within this country to working elsewhere because the academic credentials of this country are not as strong if we can't guarantee research collaboration, but also because they're not feeling very welcome. And that theme is running right the way through a lot of the feedback we're getting from our members. Two, we're getting a lot of data that's showing us that we actually do now have academics who are telling us that they are not getting the research grants with others because they are in a UK-based university. That colleagues elsewhere in Europe are telling them quite honestly, quite openly, is nothing to do with whether I like you, whether we have worked well with each other in the past. It's to do with the fact that putting UK on that application is not now helpful. In fact, it is the exact opposite. So we know that this is starting to happen now. And we also are very aware that students are making choices where they're looking at the United States, they're looking at Australia, and they're looking at India at the same time now as they are looking at the UK. So where we have sat as one of the major places where international students come, we have to recognise that we are already getting evidence from our members who work in admissions telling us that those are the conversations that they're now starting to have. So all of that evidence we are placing absolutely in the lap of any minister that we can find in order to make it very difficult for them to say that actually this is all going well and this is not going to have any damage attached to it, because that's the first thing that we've got to get through. We've got to create that kind of tension within the government so that they understand that this is going to have an economic damaging effect on them in terms of government, primarily them looking at the rest of the Tory party and knowing that that means that local MPs are getting the same feedback as well. Really important that we're doing that, and you have my word, huge amounts of time is being spent doing that. We also are going to be putting evidence in front of the Select Committee next week, the Education Select Committee, where I'll be giving evidence and showing them exactly what's taking place in terms of our members' feedback, what's taking place in terms of research funding, what's taking place in terms of teaching. I'm putting all of that to them. And what we are going to do is actually take them through a number of points, which if you go to our website, you could just get the list. And it's something that I would really urge you to just pick up and run with and start, as you've been talking about, talking to MPs, talking to whoever you can, really, and getting this argument out there. So, to start with what we're doing, we're asking specifically for a strategic review to put this alongside what's happening with the HE bill. And we're very clear that having the HE bill going through at the same time as Brexit is going through, in exactly the same time frame, has to be one of the most crazy things that you could possibly have happen. And we're asking that they actually take a pause on that and look at what will happen. Now, I don't hold my breath on the HE bill because I think there's a lot of capital invested in that in terms of private providers and in terms of tech. So we're going to have to work hard on that. But the point is being made very clearly, particularly within the Lords, that this is something they need to think of. Is this a sensible decision for government to undermine a sector through a new bill and new regimes at exactly the same time as they're undermining them through what they're doing in terms of the negotiations on Brexit? It's very hard to say anything other than no. The second thing we're doing is asking them very specifically and very early on to give us the guarantees that we need, both on the security of EU staff to be able to stay here in this country and be able to carry on with their jobs, but also for our students. Now that is something that we have to keep pushing and pushing and pushing. Third point is to make sure that we are keeping ourselves in the game in terms of being able to attract international talent coming in. Now that sounds a very kind of like motherhood and apple pie statement, but it is very important in terms of what I've said to you about how they're trying to define different categories within this immigration debate. And that is, I think, how it's going to come out. There is going to be a ranking order, there is going to be a different categorisation, and in terms of where we need to make sure the arguments are put for HE, is to make sure it's understood that that is absolutely critical for the sector, that we make sure that that door remains open. We've got to make sure that what we're doing is shifting students out of the immigration targets. Now, this is not a new argument within the Union. We have been saying this repeatedly. And I actually personally don't understand the logic of why they keep it in, because I think at a stroke they could pretend that they've reduced immigration, which seems to be what they want to do, by moving their targets. They do that with welfare bills, do they not? As far as I can work out, we shift people from one benefit system to another and we say that they aren't on it. I see no reason why they can't do that. But the key for us is that we argue very clearly students aren't immigrants, they're visitors to this country who are making a contribution to this country, who will go back to their own countries and actually have a good, we hope, experience of this country. And that is how you build economic links, actually. It is a very, very important and positive part of what we do. And that's something that we are pushing very hard on and will keep doing. More fundamentally underpinning all of that is working with the TUC in terms of employment rights. Because whilst they're talking about the grand bill that's going to come through and adopt everything that was in Europe and we're all going to be safe and cosy because it's all going to be fine, they haven't said whether it's going to stay fine in 6 months' time. What they've said is that they will then look at everything and it will be down to a vote of Parliament. Now, bless me, I'm sure that they mean it sincerely, but I don't trust the Tory as far as I can throw them when it comes to employment rights for people on the ground. And I know, given what they've done with the trade union bill, and given what they've got to do with the economy of this country, they will look to weaken employment rights because they have to make us cheaper and more competitive, because how else are we going to sit alongside the rest of Europe and say, come here rather than there? So it is fundamental to what we do as UCU that we work alongside GMB, Unite, all of those big unions for general employment matters, and campaign like mad to make sure that we keep the employment rights of our members at the top of a government agenda and make sure that that's something that they know that they have to commit to. So it's a very clear list. It's a very clear list. It's guarantee funding, guarantee access to students, guarantee access and permanency to our European colleagues in this country. Make sure that you actually recognise that we have to have decent employment conditions and actually start putting some certainty into what is a very uncertain world. So that's a lot. But I want to tell you what we have done so that you know why I know that we can do some of this. We won't get everything, but we will get something. Monday, I sat and I watched the House of Lords defeat the Higher Education Bill. That doesn't happen very often. That happened because we had put a huge amount of effort into asking our members, you, to talk to your MPs and the members of the Lords that you knew and put the pressure on. So you had all of the crossbenchers, you had the Liberal Party, you had the Labour Party combine and vote that bill down. Now what that doesn't mean is it's gone away, but it does mean that we're into the bargaining round and they won't get what they wanted, and they are very upset about that. I also watched them a number of months ago have to put back into their whole prevent strategy a parallel duty around academic freedom. They did that because we made them do that. So I know that if we put our minds to it, we can actually get shifts in this negotiation and we can get the support within Westminster in order to make the changes that we need. I think that it's going to be hard. I think it's going to be long, but I think it's worth it. It's worth it for what you said just in terms of the students here and what matters to them. It's worth it to every member that we represent, whether they're in FE, whether they're in HE, whether they're in a post or a pre-92 institution. It's worth it because we all of us got families and we all of us know that what we have at the moment is a very fragile country and one that we have an opportunity and a responsibility, I would say, as trade unionists to start rebuilding. So that's what I hope we as UCU will be participating in, and I hope that you as members recognise that we are doing our best. I know I've talked over my time and I'm very sorry, but I wanted you to get a big picture of everything that's taking place and give me, please, anything that you want me to take back. I am genuinely going to talk about what you said, Silke, on Wednesday when I'm in front of the Select Committee. I will use some of that. Anything that you want me to say, just get it to me, because I am your voice. And on this one, I'm not going to shut up until I get back as much as possible of what they're trying to take away, because it's not theirs, it's ours. And that's what we fight for. So thank you.